Thank you, Ed. Symbiosis, dependence, independence, interdependence. The relationship between humanity and nature has evolved. What it means to be human has changed depending upon how we look at nature. We alone, among animals, try to separate ourselves from nature. This separation has brought joy and grief. It has brought the abundance of food and longer life, yet loss of connection. Refuge from the heat, shelter from the storm, yet the staleness of indoor air. We began in symbiosis. Our human ancestors barely evolved from the lower primates, commingling with other human species that did not survive. We were one with nature, symbiotic like a child in the womb. There was no telling where Gaia, Mother Earth, ended and fetal humanity began. All humans knew that they were predators and prey, hunters and gatherers who were hunted and gathered by apex predators, finding shelter wherever nature provided, a cave or the shade of a tree. They followed the herds, competing with the lions, looking for the weaker animals that they could cull. They sat under their fig tree and defended it from the birds. And they followed the ripening fruit as the seasons turned, gathering in small groups to protect each other and their children. If lightning struck and a fire was found, they gathered fuel to feed that fire and keep it going. The flames were warm and welcoming and kept other animals away, except for a few brave, gentle wolves that wandered into camp and joined the tribe. Symbiosis is defined as togetherness in life. Symbios. A bee pollinates the flower it feeds upon. Animals eat fruit and spread the seeds that pass through. Nothing is contrived. Action, reaction, and consequence flow in a natural way. There's no human plan, just happy accidents. But humanity learned from these accidents and managed to increase their probability. This moved them to the age of agriculture. They learned to predict and depend upon the patterns of nature. Thus began the age of dependence. They found that the less skittish animals could stay with them all the time. The gentle wolves became dogs that were still brave enough to keep other predators away. No more wandering as nomads. Trees could be cut and shaped into permanent shelter. The earth could be molded and carved into permanent caves. People chose which seeds to plant and where. Instead of symbiotic running and searching and hiding and reacting, they settled and waited. Waited for the hen to lay eggs. Waited for the cows to give birth and provide extra milk. Waited in one place, planting seeds in the spring. During summer, the plants they didn't like were declared to be weeds, and weeds were uprooted. During the fall, they harvested and survived on what they stored until the next harvest. Depending on the stars, they learned that to everything there was a season. The stars were gods and ancestors who shared the wisdom of the ages. They were dependent children, punished and rewarded by Mother Nature, punished by drought or flood, blessed by seasons that were predictable. They grew multiple crops in one place, so at least some of the crop would survive if the growing season was too wet or too dry. Different types of potatoes grew in different climates. Many varieties of corn and other grains were chosen depending on the climate. Animal waste was fertilizer. Everything had a purpose, and there was a purpose for everything. Agriculture was the beginning of human culture. Routines were developed depending upon what nature required. Routines became rituals, and rituals became religions. The people of this region did things this way. The people of that region did things that way. Agricultural people were settled and peaceful, except they became suspicious of outsiders. Because the nomads still wandered the world. Nomads believed that the whole earth belonged to everyone. Settlers claimed and defended their territory. Cain, as the story goes, was a nomad who followed the herds. He killed Abel, who was a settled farmer. Thus Cain was sent east of Eden to roam the earth. Abraham was a wandering Aramean from Ur of the Chaldees. He settled with his son Isaac and sent Ishmael to wander. Isaac had 2 sons. Jacob, the settler, stole the birthright of Esau the wanderer. Jacob had 12 children. His favorite was Joseph. The 11 jealous brothers sold Joseph to wandering Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites sold Joseph to the people settled in Egypt, where Joseph taught them how to store their grain, so that when famine came, Joseph's brothers had to travel to Egypt to buy from their exiled brother. Joseph convinced Pharaoh to allow them to settle in Egypt. But as the generations passed upon generation, the descendants of Joseph became slaves. So Moses arose and freed them from their settlement and took them from Egypt to wander in the wilderness. They hunted and gathered manna for 40 years until Moses died, and Joshua helped them conquer land in Canaan. Thus they settled in the promised land, where sometimes they worshiped their God Yahweh, and other times worshiped the multi-agricultural gods of the Canaanites. Much of the Old Testament of the Bible is set in the context of the war between symbiotic wanderers and dependent settlers. An uneasy truce between the two was reached in Leviticus 19:33. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall do him no wrong. The stranger who sojourns with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. But the peace between nomads and agriculturalists was short-lived because of the next evolution of the human relationship with the earth. Independence from nature was gained through technology. The city-state was developed. Independent urbanites arose in Babylon, Athens, and eventually Rome. Aqueducts were built. Urbanites collected and distributed the water as they saw fit. This allowed them to dominate nature and to dominate the people who lived off the land. By controlling nature, a small industrial elite could dominate the masses. The stones were smelted into metal and fashioned into weapons of war. City-state empires arose and conquered the land and the people of the land. Imperialism brought independence to the few who used technology to dominate, to be independent. It was a worldwide phenomenon. The Incas and the Aztecs and the Olmecs in America, Timbuktu and Mogadishu in Africa, and many of the dynasties of India and China. And of course, the nomads fought back, most successfully the Khans of Mongolia, and the settlers fought back, most notably the Goths who sacked Rome. The fall of Rome is considered by Westerners to be the beginning of the Dark Ages because there was so much loss of technology that was not recovered until the Enlightenment. That is when the industrial technological age took hold. World domination followed. Europeans settled in London, Lisbon, Paris, and Madrid with the technology of ships, cannons, and guns, traded for or stole natural resources from the rest of the world. Nature, animal, and even other humans were reduced to commodities. When they reached the Americas, they conquered the industrial English, conquered the agricultural Eastern nations. The French conquered the nomads of the North. The Spanish took down the urban powers of Incas and Aztecs. Unlike nomads who lived in nature, unlike agriculturists who depended on nature, urban industrialists dominated nature. They bent nature to their will. They dammed rivers to put the water where they wanted. They dug for coal and oil to fuel their homes, allowing them to live where it could be too hot or too cold, and fuel their railroad cars and jets and boats. The land, the air, and the sea were conquered. And even farming was industrialized. Soil was fertilized so they could grow what they wanted, where they wanted. They planted what yielded the highest number of crops and the most money. Biodiversity was sacrificed for cash crops. Insects and wildlife were destroyed. Family farms became factory farms, where chickens never touch the ground and veal calves never see the light of day. Cows are milked by machine, and hog farms produce more waste than the settlers in the nearby towns. City dwellers, hungry for some semblance of nature, build well-groomed parks. They escape to the golf course, where every fairway, rough or hazard, is clearly defined. A suburban home has a beautiful sterilized lawn, and a nomadic dandelion is destroyed. For a long time, this has been a boon to humankind. Our population has increased. We live longer than our ancestors. We have conquered the earth and made it our own. But this is an illusion. We have been blinded by pride. We are facing the unintentional consequences of domination. The poison that gets rid of pests is also destroying our pollinators. In the western U.S., there are people who make a living distributing bees. Bees are loaded on trucks and moved from field to field as they are needed, depending on the season. This industrial farming is not sustainable. And our skill at creating antibiotics have created stronger bacterial strains. And as we encroach upon more and more wilderness, we encounter new viruses. And our jet-set lifestyle spreads them faster than ever before. And the contrails and exhaust spew carbon into air as we cut down the trees that turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. Thus the earth is warming and the ice caps are melting. Our port cities support ships that distribute containers worldwide. What happens when those ports are underwater? In our attempt to dominate the world, we are making it uninhabitable for us. We need to evolve again. Instead of being independent from nature, we must realize we are interdependent. We must live with the world as partners. We are not lords dominating the earth. The success of the domination has resulted in too many of us to return to symbiosis. There are not enough resources to support 8 billion hunter-gatherers. Our agricultural system cannot sustain the amount of seafood and livestock that we eat. We must change what we eat so there is enough for all to eat. We must learn to work with nature and not against it. There's a seed bank in Norway and other climate-controlled places to reduce biodiversity if any of our monocultural crops are destroyed. Our corn, soybean, rice, wheat, and corn are all susceptible to blight. And that will spread faster than any human virus. We need to reintroduce biodiversity before the system collapses. We must consider how we produce energy. Is it a renewable source? And how much energy does each of us use? And how does our energy use as citizens of the United States compare to those around the world? What can each of us as an individual do to change our relationship with the world? How do we shed the illusion of independence and stop trying to dominate? In my lifetime, there has been an exodus from the north, where I and my wife grew up, to the southern states. And this was made possible by the advent of air conditioning, which uses a lot of energy. And for a while, the substance we use to help air condition our homes put a hole in the ozone layer protecting the earth. We managed to change our behavior and close that hole. What behaviors do we need to change about how we live, how we move, how we eat, that will help bring about an evolution from independence to interdependence, from domination to partnership? We need the earth more than the earth needs us. If we make it uninhabitable for us, we will be just one of many extinct species. The earth will not miss us any more than it misses dinosaurs. Life will go on. Life will find a way. But if we are willing to cooperate with lives other than our own, human life will also continue. The transition will not be smooth. Nomad settlers and dominators will continue to exist, and they will resist as we try to become interdependent partners with nature. So we must become partners with our present and our past. We will confront the nomad, the settler, the dominator within ourselves. These forms will never go away because they emerge out of each other. they can only be reimagined and transformed. The symbiotic nomads lived in the abundant green of summer. Dependent agricultural settlers lived in the earth tones of an autumn harvest. Independent, dominating urbanites can survive the gray of winter, but need to change so that they don't create a permanent sterility and grayness. We must learn the lessons, the strengths of all our ancestors, gather the wisdom, and hunt down the folly, and learn to become the spring green, the rising green of being interdependent partners with nature. May we bless and be blessed.
Thank you, Charlie. We much appreciated your words, and we just hope that somehow we can